Good morning, everyone. I am Christina Balian, your reporter for today's class. Before we start our discussion, let's have a brief introduction about the topic. An writing it is written work that follow basic grammatical structure like words and phrases that arranged into sentences and paragraphs. It is simply means a language that follows natural patterns found in every speech. It can be either be called fiction or non-fiction. It has a wide range of characters, events, and experiences. It gives the writer freedom to make use different grammatical structure, and it is also most popular genre of literature. What is prose? Prose is a verbal or written language that follows the natural flow of speech. It is the most common form of writing used in both fiction and nonfiction. Prose came from the Latin prosa oratio, meaning straightforward. Meaning, prose is a literary device referring to writing that is structured in grammatical way, with words and phrases that build sentences and paragraphs. Its work wrote in prose feature language that flows in natural patterns of everyday speech. Prose is the most common and popular form of writing in fiction and nonfiction works. As a literary device, prose is a way for writers to communicate with readers in a straightforward, even in conversational manner and tone. This creates a level of familiarity that allows the reader to connect with the writer's expressions, narrative, and characters. We have different types of prose, which are nonfiction prose, fictional prose, heroic prose, and prose poetry. First, we have nonfiction prose. A nonfiction prose is a true story or factual account of events or information is nonfiction, like textbooks, newspaper articles, and instruction manual all fall into this category. So this type of literary work is based on fact even though it may contain unfictional elements like for example the biography. We have some example of nonfiction prose which are The Diary of a Young Girl, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, and Into Thin Air, the personal account of Mount Everest disaster. Fictional prose is an imaginary story usually written down that someone tells in everyday natural language. Fictional prose is the opposite of non-fictional prose. Fictional prose is work as an imaginary. It lets the people live into the reality of the world, exploring characters and events that typically are limited only by the scope of the writer's imagination. Although individual labeled this story by form and genre, a common thread is the use of universal themes that trigger emotional responses from the readers. Some examples in these categories are history textbooks and autobiographies. Some people also see poetry as a contrast because it relies on rhyming, meter, and other techniques such as metaphor, rather than using more conversational language. This is the most popular type of literary prose used in novels and short stories and generally has characters, plot, settings, and dialogue. Heroic prose is a literary work that is either written down or preserved through oral tradition, but is meant to be recited. Heroic prose is usually a legend or fable. Heroic prose uses the hero archetype in order to tell the stories of bravery and travel in which good triumphs over evil. Heroic prose may use tricks such as rhyme and slight rhythmic structure in order to enhance the effects of being read out, but are not the same as an ancient hero tales which were written in strict poetic verse. We have some example of heroic prose which are 30th Saga and Volsunga Saga that based on ancient Germanic oral tradition of 4th to 6th century and contain many lines from lost heroic lays. Lastly, we have prose poetry. A prose poetry uses certain poetic qualities in order to add lyrical or aesthetic value to writing. However, it stops short of any regular or strict metered form. This style of writing creates bolder emotional effects and often relies on metaphors and imagery in order to create similar reactions in readers that poetry would, while still maintaining the prose style. Let us now proceed in what are the difference between prose and poetry. Prose follows natural patterns of speech and communication, has grammatical structure with sentences and paragraphs, uses everyday language and sentences and thoughts continue across the lines, while the poetry, traditional poetry, has deliberate patterns such as rhythm and rhyme. Many poems have a formal metrical structure, repeating patterns of beats, and incorporates more figurative language. What is the function of prose in writing? First, fulfill a story promise. In literature, the basic purpose of prose in writing is to convey an idea, deliver information, or tell a story. Prose is the way a writer fulfills her basic promise to a reader to deliver a story with characters, setting, conflict, a plot, and a final payoff. Second, create a voice. Each writer has their own way of using language, called a writer's voice. Using prose in different ways help writer craft and show off this voice. Last, build rapport through familiarity. Prose is often conversational in tone. This familiarity helps connect readers to story and its characters. That's all for today. Thank you. Have a nice day.